Mr. President, allow me at the outset to express our appreciation for your decision to chair this very important meeting at ministerial level and for the important role France plays on this Council and in support of efforts for peace in our region. I want also to welcome all ministers who are with us today. Allow me further to thank the Secretary General for not allowing the world to look away or forget Gaza and the occupied Palestinian territory, reminding them of their obligations and for being a strong voice for humanity and peace. I want also to thank him for being with us today and for his statement, along with the statement of his head of the legal department on behalf of the Secretary General yesterday at The Hague before we presented our opinion. Allow me also to convey our utmost respect for the UN and its heroic personnel on the ground who are risking their lives to save lives. The Security Council has adopted binding resolutions with clear goals: stopping the bloodshed, humanitarian aid reaching those who desperately need it, releasing hostages and detainees, preventing forcible displacement and any attempts at annexation, achieving the two-state solution. The world rallied behind these goals, and yet the reality today is a declared punitive siege by Israel over Gaza to deprive 2 million Palestinians, half of them children, of food and water and medicine and electricity, and all other essentials of life while they endure unbearable, inhumane conditions. There is no shortage of bombs falling on Gaza, but there is an imposed shortage of everything else. Starvation as a weapon of war against an entire civilian population that is still being bombarded relentlessly. Families of hostages and detainees are growing more desperate every day. Their plans for forcible displacement and annexations are well underway, and Israeli leaders no longer feel the need to disguise or hide their nefarious intentions. We cannot surrender to this situation. Let me repeat, we cannot surrender to this situation. We must bring it to an end. An immediate ceasefire must be resumed, and all its objectives must be achieved. President Trump, in his latest conversation with the Israeli Prime Minister, stressed what he called, in his own words, the need to be good to Gaza, given how people there are suffering, and signaling specifically that the United States are pushing to secure the entry of food and medicines to Gaza. We deeply hope that the United States, Egypt, and Qatar, with the support of the international community as a whole, will be able to secure a return to the ceasefire to start bringing all this suffering to an end. Mr. President, there is a way out of this nightmare for everyone's benefit. President Abbas, in his address to the PLO Central Council, made it clear that we want peace. I repeat, we want peace, not only for ourselves, but for all. That we are committed to the rule of international law and want to see it prevail. That we believe that the peaceful approach is the one that can deliver our people's rights, and that there is no justification for harming civilians whether Palestinians or Israelis. At the same meeting, the PLO Central Council established the position of Vice President of the PLO and the State of Palestine, held since by Mr. Hussein al-Sheikh. I was supposed to attend the Central Council in Ramallah. Instead, Israel, after holding me up for 5 hours, denied me entry to my own country that I proudly represent here. I am a Palestinian born in Palestine to Palestinian parents, and I am prohibited from entering my own country. This is a very small part of the collective punishment imposed on all Palestinians and of the denial of our existence and rights as a nation and as individuals. Mr. President, you have on one side a Palestinian leadership committed to nonviolence, and on the other hand, an Israeli leadership unleashing the worst forms of violence against an entire civilian population. You have a Palestinian leadership that is clearly and unequivocally committed to the two-state solution, and an Israeli leadership decided to its destruction. You have a Palestinian leadership that is showing restraint and acting responsibly, and you have an Israeli leadership whose actions are dictated by its populist and fanatical views. You have a Palestinian leadership committed to international law and aligned with the international consensus, and an Israeli leadership that considers that the rules depend on the identity of the victims and the identity of the perpetrators, demanding impunity for its crimes and considering our very existence a crime. You have a Palestinian leadership that has been responsive to the demands for reforms and an Israeli leadership that has flatly rejected change. You have a Palestinian leadership committed to a simple and yet essential idea: live and let live, and an Israeli leadership that believes that the existence of one people requires the destruction of another. The international community has determined a long time ago that there is not a people too many in the Middle East, but an independent state missing, the independent state of Palestine. Mr. President, there are solutions for those not searching for excuses to prolong the war and unbearable human suffering. There are solutions whereby Hamas would no longer rule Gaza, and transitional governance arrangements would set the stage for the PA to fully assume its responsibilities in the Gaza Strip. There are solutions for the reconstruction of the massive destruction Israel has caused in Gaza without displacing its population. There are solutions for ending this illegal occupation and conflict and ushering an era of shared peace, security, and prosperity. In this regard, Arab countries have displayed leadership that has been commended worldwide. Egypt and Qatar mediating the ceasefire. Arab countries taking the lead when it comes to humanitarian aid through Jordan and Egypt. The responsible roles played by Algeria and the United Arab Emirates in this council over the course of the last 2 years. The Arab Reconstruction Plan, endorsed by the OIC and supported by international partners. The leading role of Saudi Arabia and as chair of the Arab Islamic Committee and as co-chair of the Global Alliance with Norway and the EU, and so-called chair of the June Peace Conference with France. International partners have welcomed, have joined, have contributed to, and have helped advance these initiatives, all seeking just and lasting peace. The international mobilization has never been stronger to confront a reality that has never been darker. We see this mobilizations here in the Council, in the General Assembly, at the International Court of Justice, all determined to uphold international law to end this most painful and historic injustice. As we approach the June conference on the peaceful settlement of the question of Palestine and the implementation of the two-state solution, we call on all states to do all that they can to uphold international law, support our right to self-determination, and salvage peace. We endorse the call of the Secretary General when he said to all of you and those who are outside this room, this is the time for action, not the reiteration of what we agreed to. This is the time for action. We call on those who have yet to do so to recognize the state of Palestine without any further delay, as a clear signal that they will not tolerate its destruction and the destruction of the two-state solution. We believe, Mr. President, that your country in this regard can play a pivotal role. We call on all states to take measures against settlement colonization and against annexation and forcible displacement, and to end Israelis' unlawful presence in the occupied Palestinian territory in line with the ICJ advisory opinion. We call on all states to support the Palestinian government, which shown clear commitment to reform and peace, and to support politically and financially the Arab Reconstruction Plan, and to continue supporting UNRWA. Mr. President, the Palestinian people are in a cage, killed and starved, day after day after day. As Pope Francis said, this is not war, this is cruelty. Our greatest fear is that the world is growing accustomed to such horrors, that while it condemns Israelis' actions, it feels powerless to stop them. But we ask all countries not to surrender to this self-inflicted powerlessness. Let me repeat. We ask all countries not to surrender to this self-inflicted powerlessness. These atrocities have no moral or legal justifications. This genocide has to end, and life must prevail. The Palestinian people are entitled to international protection for as long as they are trapped under military occupation. A ceasefire in the Gaza Strip, which remains the top priority, should also be accompanied by an end of attacks and repression by Israeli occupation forces and settlers across the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, which are displacing entire communities. Mr. President, Prime Minister Netanyahu delivered another delusional speech 2 days ago. He insisted once again that the two-state solution meant the destruction of Israel. He said, and I quote, Hamas says we will destroy Israel by terror and military conquest right away, and the PA says, no, you destroy it politically by driving it through propaganda and lawfare to the 67 borders, end of quotation. Pursuing an independent state of Palestine living side by side with Israel in accordance with resolutions of this very council and the very United Nations resolutions in which the state of Israel was established with the partition of Palestine is somehow pursuing the destruction of Israel? Does that make sense? This is nonsense. Those who benefited from the privilege of resolutions of the General Assembly, including the partition plan, and admitted as a member state, are saying us seeking peaceful methods to accomplish the establishment of the independence of the state of Palestine is now the destruction of the state of Israel? Who is among you would buy this nonsense? He spoke of the attempts to annihilate Israel when in reality he is the one pursuing the annihilation of Palestine and its people. He spoke of how the Israeli army moves Palestinian civilians out of harm's way when in reality it has shown total disregard for Palestinian lives, killing and maiming and detaining and torturing and starving them endlessly. He bragged about Israel's violations of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Lebanon and Syria, which must be rejected by all. He again asserted that he will pursue peace with regional partners while sidelining the Palestine question as if nothing had happened these last 18 months. He spoke with the same arrogance, the same aversion to facts, and the same disregard for the suffering of people, whether Palestinian or Israelis. Fanatical delusions will destroy our region. We need a strong leadership for peace. I repeat, we need a strong leadership for peace. The deployment of collective resolve at an unprecedented scale that will finally deliver freedom for the Palestinian people. Two states living side by side in peace and security and unleash the true potential of our region for the benefit of all. And we totally agree with you, Mr. Secretary General, when you always say there is no plan B for the two-state solution. We belong resolutely to this camp and count in your collective support to ensure it prevails. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, Secretary General, Ministers, Excellencies, it is symbolic that this session is taking place on the eve of Israel's Memorial Day, Yom HaZikaron. It is the day when we honor the soldiers who gave their lives defending our state and the innocent civilians whose lives were cut short by terror. Israel welcomes what is hopefully to be a broader debate on the Middle East. Far too often, this Council confines its focus to a narrow segment of the region, missing the broader forces at play, both the forces of progress and the forces of destruction. Today we have a chance to widen that lens, and we must. As we speak, the Middle East is in dynamic motion. Danger and opportunity walk side by side. There is much to be hopeful about: economic development, dialogue and collaboration. However, the threats loom imminent, more dangerous than ever. For all the momentum, there are forces seeking to reverse it and take advantage of the instability. And those forces are growing more violent and more entrenched. This is the reality of the Middle East, and we implore the Council and the international community not to ignore or minimize the forces of ruin. This is the reality of terrorism and extremism, of forces present in the Middle East that despise peace and will not rest until their sick version of destruction is fulfilled. There is powerful opportunity in Lebanon today. Public voices, civil society leaders, and elements within its new government are calling for sovereignty, for an end to Hezbollah's tyranny over their country. The Lebanese people have made one thing unmistakably clear: they want peace, stability, and a future free from terror. But Hezbollah, a murderous terrorist organization backed by Iran, continues to hold sway over stockpiles of weapons in civilian areas and is intent on dragging the Lebanese population towards another devastating war. Hezbollah's murderous intent is vividly demonstrated by Hezbollah's ongoing activities. Just 2 days ago, the IDF struck a terrorist infrastructure site in the Dakhya, a Hezbollah stronghold in Beirut, which contained precision missiles intended for use against Israel. The storage of such weaponry within civilian areas constitutes a blatant violation of understandings between Israel and Lebanon and a clear violation of international law. Hezbollah's systematic embedding of missiles amidst the Lebanese population is a cynical exploitation of civilians and another contemptible assault on basic human morality. Prior to the strike, Israel took significant steps to mitigate the risk to uninvolved civilians, including issuing advanced warnings and using precise munitions. Israel will continue to act as necessary to remove threats to its people while taking every possible measure to uphold its obligations under international law. The Lebanese government must have a monopoly on military force. That is the Israeli position. That is the Lebanese position. That is the position of our cessation of hostilities agreement, and it is, of course, the position of this Council per Resolution 1701 and 1559. However, the international support for Lebanese sovereignty and Hezbollah's disarmament must be more than rhetorical. The implementation of the cessation of hostilities agreement on the Lebanese side remains partial, with many of the violations reported to the US-led mechanisms remaining unaddressed. The international community must take tangible steps to assist the Lebanese government and armed forces in reclaiming its sovereignty and dismantling Hezbollah's parallel army of terrorists. We cannot waste another decade standing by as Hezbollah regains its strengths and further entrenches itself in Lebanon. Syria today is a country no longer under the Assad regime, but not yet under stable governance. The collapse of the Assad regime created a volatile void. The armed militias roam unchecked, Iranian-backed forces operate with impunity, radical groups, some aligned with the most brutal global terror networks, control territory and populations. As is too often the case in times of collapse, Syria's most vulnerable, its minorities, its internally displaced, its religious and ethnic communities are the ones left exposed. Christians, Druze, Kurds, Yazidis are all caught between a shattered state and roaming militias. Moreover, we cannot ignore the deeply troubling pattern emerging in Syria, where individuals with jihadist backgrounds have been appointed to key positions within the provisional government and its affiliated armed groups. These individuals, many of whom were previously aligned with terrorist organizations such as Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and Jabhat al-Nusra, now hold command over military infrastructure that could be used to destabilize the region and threaten the security of neighboring states, including Israel. These groups' ideologies are clear and cause for serious alarm. This threat was evident last month in the brutal massacre and abuse of Alawite civilians and other vulnerable populations. The Syrian people deserve better. They deserve a future not dominated by sectarianism and foreign interference. They deserve international support that empowers local stability, not the enabling of jihadism and chaos. This Council must recognize the urgency of the situation. Syria must not become a permanently fractured state governed by guns, but by the rule of law. The region cannot afford it, and the Syrian people can no longer endure it. Mr. President, as we look across the region, there is one thread connecting the instability. It is the same thread connected to the Houthi missiles which are relentlessly fired at Israel population centers. It is the same thread connected to Hamas's massacre of our people on October 7th. Iran is not a lowly agitator. It is the engineer of our region's turmoil. Through Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza, militias in Iraq and Syria, and the Houthis in Yemen, Iran has constructed a deliberate network of violence to expand its reach and destabilize its enemies. This is active, ongoing, and strategic. And above all, Iran continues to advance its nuclear ambitions. It issues existential threats openly and regularly. Israel will not allow Iran to obtain nuclear weapons. We will not waver. We will not retreat on this issue, and we call on the international community to uphold that red line, because the consequences of a nuclear Iran will not be limited to Israel. They will extend across this region and beyond. The international community can no longer afford to abdicate its responsibility when it comes to Iran. The chaos Tehran has unleashed across the region is a result of years of hesitation and indulgence. Its accelerating nuclear program now poses an even graver threat. It is time to confront the reality that unchecked Iranian aggression will not recede on its own. It must be confronted decisively and collectively. Iran's fingerprints are, of course, on the situation in Gaza, where its proxy Hamas has brought only ruin to its people and terror to ours. I remind the Council that Israel did not seek this war. It was forced upon us on October 7th, when Hamas committed the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. Over 1,200 murdered, entire families, babies, children, mothers, grandparents wiped out. 251 hostages were taken into Gaza. Today, 59 of those innocent people remain, with 24 believed to be alive. 35 more are believed to be dead, their bodies still inhumanely held. Hamas has rejected every reasonable offer for their return home. Instead, it releases horrifying footage of hostages to deepen the agony of their families and to prolong their torment. This is sadism. It is psychological warfare in the vilest degree imaginable. Israel has a duty to its people and to the world to dismantle Hamas's military and governing infrastructure, to ensure Gaza can never again be used as a launchpad for atrocities, and first and foremost, to bring our hostages home. However, that duty has never come at the cost of our international obligations. Allow me to remind the Council that Article 70 of the first additional protocol to the Geneva Conventions requires aid where the civilian population is not adequately supplied. During the 42-day ceasefire, more than 25,000 aid trucks entered Gaza, facilitated by Israel. These trucks carried tens of thousands of tons of humanitarian aid, including food, fuel, and medical supplies. Israel is closely monitoring the situation and coordinating with relevant UN agencies and humanitarian organizations on the ground. Our assessments indicate there is currently no evidence of a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Further, under Article 23 of the Fourth Geneva Convention, a party is not obliged to allow in aid that is likely to support the enemy's military effort. And yet, this is exactly what Hamas has done, stealing aid from the civilian population and selling supplies to rebuild the terror machine. Still, some in the international community continue to draw dangerous false equivalencies, ignoring that Hamas alone began this war, continuing to prolong it, and still holds 59 hostages underground in inhumane conditions. 59 hostages who have never received an ounce of humanitarian aid. As Eli Sharabi recently testified before this council, he personally witnessed Hamas terrorists bringing UN humanitarian aid into their tunnels where they consumed it themselves, denying even the smallest share to the starving hostages. This war can end tomorrow if Hamas releases the hostages and lays down its weapons. That is the only path to peace. That is why the convening of the high-level international conference on the conflict in June is destined, unfortunately, to fail. Such an initiative is disconnected from the current reality and risks doing more harm than good, particularly in the post-October 7th environment. It creates false expectations while ignoring the underlying dysfunction of the Palestinian Authority, its ongoing support for terrorism via the pay-for-slay program, its refusal to implement long-overdue reforms, its promotion of incitement, and its legal warfare against Israel in the international forum. Yet this conference provides fertile ground for yet another opportunity to politicize and polarize international forums, deepening the divide and moving all parties further from peace. Genuine progress will not come from internationalizing the conflict or from one-sided measures decided by uninvolved parties. It will come from responsible leadership, the rejection of terrorism, and embracing the moderate parties. Efforts to promote this conference undermine the path towards real regional progress. Instead of amplifying failed approaches, the international community should focus its energy where it is most needed, confronting the radical axis led by Iran and its terror proxies. Esteemed Council members, there is a danger in mistaking aspiration for reality. This Council must not fall into the trap of wishful thinking. We cannot speak of reconstruction without security. We cannot achieve Lebanese sovereignty while tolerating Hezbollah. We cannot promote regional cooperation while ignoring Iran's nuclear aspirations. And one cannot claim to stand for peace while legitimizing the forces that slaughtered families in their homes. There is tremendous opportunity in the Middle East today, but the greatest threat to that opportunity is terrorism, fanaticism, and an apparent international blindness to them. If we are serious about building a better future for the region, then we must also be serious about naming the obstacles in the way. Israel is ready. We are ready to work with regional partners, ready to deepen cooperation, but we will not compromise on the security of our people, and we will not accept the permanence of terror. This Council has a chance to support progress, to back governments that seek reform, to empower voices that reject extremism, to stand with those who value life and prosperity, not death and misery. It is not too late, but the window will not stay open forever. Through a realistic acceptance of the challenging reality in the Middle East, it might be possible to summon the resolve to harness the potential for an improved future for all. I thank you, Mr. President.